Hi all, welcome back to another session on mulesoft. So in this, I wanted to show how we can apply authentication on top of an API, which is published from the local development. So in our previous example, what we have seen is we just directly invoked the listener port on 8081, and then just when we invoked it, it was giving us the output. So now I wanted to publish this API to the API manager and make sure that it goes through authentication route and block the unauthorized request. So let's see how that can be done. So for this to happen, we'll be using the concept of API discovery. So this is the REST demo application which we did on one of our examples. So I'm publishing this to cloud. So I'll create. If I go to API discovery, it expects the API ID. So this API ID needs to come from API manager, and flow is nothing but the REST demo flow, and this is a mandatory one. So first, what we need to do is we need to go to the API endpoint here, and so I'll click on API manager, and I'll add an API. I'll add a new API, and then I'll add it to Mule Gateway. Yeah, and I'll keep the what do you say base the things as same and not change anything, and then click on next, and then I'll click next. So I'll create a new API. I'll say it as REST API demo. The set type is HTTP. If you see REST and all, it allows us to upload the JSON files and all. So I just wanted to keep HTTP response API here and click next. So if you have Swagger files created and all those things, we can easily import here. And I will just click next and next and save. So I created an application now. So it is saying me that first it is unregistered. I need to copy this API instance ID. Now go back to this API auto discovery and copy the ID here, and then done. So now we are linking the API manager API ID with the local instance of our Mule project which we created. Now let's export this. It will create a jar file. So give it some time. It will create a jar there. So now I'll go back, go to uh, go and create my runtime manager application. So I'll go here, and when you are deploying an API that is having a link between the API manager and your MuleSoft local application, it expects the client ID and client secret of the environment to be present. So we need to get that first. How do you get it? So you need to go to access management and go to business groups. Click on your business group and go to environments. I'm using the sandbox. I'll go here. These are my credentials. So I'll just copy this and you need to copy in any point dot platform dot client ID. Same thing in client secret. Yeah, and this. If you don't do this, the deployment will fail when you deploy the application. So let's see whether this has done. So this has exported. So I'll go here and deploy the application. I'll give it as REST API demo from local. Yeah, and I'll upload the file. So before clicking on deploy, I'll add the properties. You can add it in table key value pairs, but I'll add it as equal to value here and then deploy. So give it some time. Now, if you see this way, if the details are all correct, so it will slowly load the application and it will change status to active. So give it some time here. For some time. This is still running now. Meanwhile, I'll copy this public URL. Status is available. Let's see if this will run or not. It's still not running because the changes are still being applied there. So it has now run successfully. So if I just go and click send, so it has invoked the API, even though credentials are not passed. Ignore this, I'm not passing it runtime, but still it is just taking the details and it is still what do you say, not secured. So now what I'll do, I'll go to my API manager. If you have observed, our application was showing as unregistered. So now what we have done, we created the link between that, and let's give it some more time here. See, now it has become active. So currently there are no policies applied saying that, okay, you need to follow the client ID enforcement and all. So that's why it is still running. Yeah, now what I'll do is I'll go to policies. I'll add a policy and I'll enforce a policy saying enforce the client ID policy here and click next. So it says you can pass the attributes in header and it is in client ID and client secret. Just click apply. So while this policy gets synced, let's see till what time it will allow us. Yeah, it is allowed now. It is still allowed. See, now it is failing saying that. See now, we can see that has been a change made on API manager, which expects the authentication to be passed. I see you are not passing any authentication and freely enjoying with the API. So we have now blocked. You are no longer the recipient of this API. So now what he will do is we will request us to give the access to that API. So we'll go to Exchange. Yeah, and this is my API. Request the access. This is the instance name 573. So same thing which we kept here. It's 573. It is requesting access. Create the application name, REST, API demo, test, create, and request access. So the first client ID and client secret was to deploy the application. Now this API access is to create the what do you say? You want the other use to use your application. So this client ID and client secret is the one which is to allow the access to your application. So you have to go to client ID, pass this client secret, pass this. Now let's pass this and see what happens. See, it has accepted the credentials which you passed. Now if I pass corrupted, it will say invalid client. So this is how you create your API and deploy it to the cloud and make sure that policies are applied